Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. My name is Vaibhav Narayan. I am in the neuroscience therapeutic area in Janssen R&D, and Janssen is essentially the collective pharmaceutical companies of Johnson & Johnson. And it's my pleasure today to talk to all of you about the vision and some of the details behind RADAR. First few slides, I'm just going to speak to what's the overall larger challenge that we're trying to address. And of course, in most sort of neuropsychiatric and neurodegenerative diseases, what happens is that patients are seen by physicians for short periods of time, and in fact, most of the time the patient spends is not in a doctor's office, but being out and about. And a lot of the times, the evaluation is based on subjective criteria. And these diseases, as we know, are actually fairly dynamic in nature, and changes in disease state, exacerbations or full-blown relapses, can happen in time periods that are much shorter than the overall time between visits. And what we in sort of the pharma industry have been looking at is this notion that technologies are advancing in ways that we can now study the physics, the biology, and the physiology of patients remotely quite accurately. And the vision behind RADAR is that can we bring to bear these advances in biosensing technologies to really track changes in disease state accurately in a way that it helps improve overall patient outcomes. Next slide, please. And so again, sort of restating the vision, we do want to move from a more reactive paradigm of, the patient comes in, you try to ask them subjectively what happened, you react to what you see, and then you sort of treat, to more of a predict and preempt paradigm. And we are interested in being able to harness essentially the patient's own data in being able to do that. And in this slide, I just speak to sort of a broader vision, perhaps a little bit even more broader than what we are going to focus on RADAR. So if you just quickly go around this slide, typically when we have tried to predict, either assess disease states or predict changes in disease states, we have relied on biomarker data or collected in well-controlled studies, and we come up with a predictive biomarker, and that biomarker is assessed. Well, I think what's going to happen over the coming years is that the data types are going to expand much more. In addition to sort of the biomarker data that is collected once and for all in control studies and given in labs, for example, if you go down one step, what we will also find is that a lot of the times biomarker measurements will be made point of care, either right there in a physician's office or even in people's home with you bleed on one drop of blood onto a home device, and you can measure a lot of biomarkers. This is going to inject new types of data into the system, and also I think a lot of data, unstructured data from patient hospital records, physician notes, and like I said already, quantitative data from continuous, real-time data from patients, from remote sensing technologies like actigraphy, sleep, etc. We believe that a time will come when all these data types will be available to be developed into an algorithm that will more accurately in real time define disease states and predict changes in disease states. And we believe that neuroscience and CNS is particularly well positioned to take advantage of these new data types. Partly because a lot of the symptomatology in CNS disorders is through parameters that can be measured remotely, changes in behavior, activity, sleep, etc. And for this particular RADAR, we have picked 3 disease areas to focus on. One is, of course, trying to understand the changes in dynamic disease course of depression, looking at exacerbations in patients with multiple sclerosis, and being able to predict in near term sort of the risk of an epileptic fit. But I just want to point out, and I've grayed out, that going forward, you can imagine other more important endpoints being predicted and tracked as well. For example, onset of mania and bipolar disorder, psychotic break in schizophrenia patients, and related and pain-related symptoms as well. But just for the record, right now we are focused on the top 3 paradigms. Next slide, please. And so I think as I've alluded, this notion of radar actually has many layers to it and is a very fairly general one. You could imagine that various technologies can be built that provide a common framework for collecting data, analyzing data, processing data, developing biosignatures. So we envision a broader radar platform which will develop some of these common infrastructure, and also will develop some of the common address some of the common challenges, say in regulatory issues, etc. But then within this overall radar platform or infrastructure, we will have specific topics dedicated to specific diseases. So currently, topic 1 is dedicated to diseases related to CNS, and in particular depression, MS, and epilepsy. And in future, we imagine that different topics might be slotted into this overall radar program. And later on, my colleague from Janssen, Anthony Rowe, is going to speak a little bit more about in more detail about what this this kind of an infrastructure or organizational principle looks like. Next slide. So, with that said, as background, I just want to sort of speak a little bit to the overall objectives of the CNS topic within radar. Like I've said, the key thing we want to do is to be able to characterize disease state and predict changes in disease state using non-invasive remote sensing technologies. And I think the non-invasive part, I think, is clear. The remote sensing is clear. I should just add that our emphasis will be on making measurements that can be essentially obtained passively. In other words, not relying so much on patient self-reports and questionnaires, but on passively collected objective data. And like I've said, that we will, for now, focus on unipolar depression, MS, and epilepsy. And for each of these, we want to be able to perform a non-interventional observational studies with the objectives of, like I said, characterize changes in disease state. And how do you define changes in disease state? Well, we believe that in these observational studies, patients will be brought in and also evaluated clinically periodically, and so that will serve sort of as a gold standard on is their disease state changing. And also we might give them self-report questionnaires to get an idea of how do they perceive their symptoms to be, and we will want to see if these passive technologies can also track these changes in disease state as measured by other modalities. Now, characterizing changes in disease state as it happens is, of course, very useful. And going to the third bullet, for a second, but being able to predict future sort of decline in disease state is even more valuable. And by that, what I mean is that, if we can say pick up a week or two in advance that somebody is going to have a relapse in depression or a serious exacerbation in MS, or is going to, is headed towards an epileptic episode, then that kind of a predictive paradigm can help us intervene in various ways and preempt that episode altogether. So this prediction is an important element we want to do. Essentially, we want to predict relapse and preempt it. And the third thing, bullet, which is about characterizing of changes in disease state due to drug effects, we have kept in there because we recognize that these are observational studies. We don't expect people to be taken off of their current medications or being put on any medications. So people will be taking medications, and these medications will have an impact on their symptomatology. And so this will give us an opportunity to at least understand those impacts as well. But I should say that that's not the main goal of radar. The main goal of radar is to track and predict organic changes in disease state due to any reason. It could be reason due to adherence issues, but it could also very much be due to just the progression of the disease in itself or other sort of exacerbating factors. So hopefully that is clear. Next slide, please. So one of the one of the questions, of course, to be addressed in this webinar and otherwise as well, is that why are we as pharma companies going for a public-private collaboration, right? Why are we, we've spent, like was said, many months as a lot of multiple pharma companies coming together trying to create this IMI proposal and go for a pre-competitive consortia. And while let me try and address that a little bit. While we think that this predictive and preemptive paradigm is very beneficial for overall patient outcomes and also helps us sort of optimize in the long run how therapies are given, the fact of the matter is that development of such remote biosignatures or biomarkers is really does not fit the traditional business models of pharmaceutical or even big tech companies, right? We as a pharma company are not really in the business of selling, devices that are predictive of changes in disease state, and big tech companies themselves are not in the business of understanding changes in clinical state, and so we do firmly believe that it would take different entities to come together in a pre-competitive way to really make advances in this area, and the patients will benefit and all the constituents will benefit as a result. So I think that we have, at least from the member companies that have come together, a lot of alignment within the senior management of big pharma that we really need to do this pre-competitively. And I think I've sort of also alluded to this, that developing such remote biosignatures is really going to be a multidisciplinary effort. We would need advances in biosensors, streaming analytics, data sciences, clinical trial design, regulatory sort of input, understanding pathways of care, understanding adherence issues, adoption issues, and really I think we think that the only way to really get all this expertise is to develop an ecosystem across academic and industry partners. And we also believe that and this is back to the third point, that if we really want such sort of methodologies to be adopted and accepted by patients, we would need to really align a lot of different stakeholders like healthcare authorities, physician groups, patient advocacy groups. And so it really cannot be an effort that is controlled and championed by individual pharma companies. It has to really be more of a broad-based approach with lots of interactions and buy-in from different stakeholders. For all these reasons, we believe that going a public-private collaborative route is the best way to do it. Next slide, please. And so like I said, I will just sort of say one or two things about this slide, and then I'll ask my colleague Anthony to sort of jump in as well. So, like I said, we believe that there is an overall RADAR program within which there is a CNS topic. We believe that we can have multiple indications in this CNS topic, like depression, epilepsy, and MS, mainly because even though there are different diseases, some of the measurements that we need to make are going to be shared and common across these diseases. So there's going to be some synergies there, and hence, they are under the CNS topic. For example, in all these three disease areas, if you want to do remote assessment, we would like to be able to measure sleep, physical activity, changes in speech and tonality, changes in cognition, changes in social connectivity patterns, and changes in memory as well. And so this gives us an opportunity to really reuse some of the expertise in making these measurements, in analyzing these measurements, and the biosensors involved. One more point I want to make as well is that while we have said that there are three distinct cohorts, depression, epilepsy, and MS, we also recognize that, for example, depression and MS can often be comorbid, or people, when real patients come in, they have comorbidities, and so we may have an opportunity to study changes in disease state for more than one diseases in a same patient population. And how these are designed, whether they are independent cohorts or mixed population or comorbid populations, I think this is something that we would like to hear from our sort of applicants. Another thing I want to say, in addition to what's already on the slide, is that in the way we as pharma companies have come together and the way we have contributed to this, clearly we want to make sure that we have enough sort of patients in the depression and MS arenas so that we can make some discoveries, right? It is powered to actually generate and even test some hypotheses. For the epilepsy cohorts, I think that we may be able to sort of fund the generation of large enough cohorts to make de novo sort of hypotheses, but it may well be partly because epilepsy is a little bit more mature in terms of remote sensing applications, and partly because of the amounts we are contributing from an epilepsy perspective. It may well be that in epilepsy we focus more on validating and further improving certain sort of sensing technologies. And I just wanted to add this as additional color to what's already on the slide. So with that said, I'd like to just invite Anthony, who's really going to be leading and managing the more information technology related aspects of this particular project and the data side of this project, to also say a few words about this slide. Anthony?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well, Anthony.
Thank you. So, so just to introduce myself, my name is Anthony Rowe, and I work in the Translational Informatics group of Janssen R&D, and very much Vipath's partner on this from the technology, data, and analytics side of this. So when we started looking at what the core elements that we would need to explore as a result of the overall project, as we've mentioned, this first and foremost is a clinical experiment to try and understand changes in depression patients, epilepsy patients, and multiple sclerosis patients. Those components, whether they're run as 3 individual cohorts or as cohorts as Vipath have just described them with comorbidities, that is for the applicant groups to decide how they think they would like to best structure that. But our vision is very much that we would like to come together around a common platform of passive remote assessment tools for understanding the behavioral and psychometric parameters of these different patients. And so we've put in the core, and it's worth reinforcing here, is that we envisage some sort of work package or work group who are looking how to provide a common toolkit, a toolkit that allows us, using the same platform, to equip patients in all 3 of these diseases with the same technology that must be essentially simple to use, easy to adhere to, require very little intervention from the use of the users, and to sort of measure things in these following metrics: the sleep architecture, the physical activity the patient's taking, speech, cognition, social connectivity, and memory. And if we can measure all these things in a common platform against all these diseases, we start to have the basis of a standardized way of trying to measure these types of components. So that's a key area of this. The second element that we need to look at and to be in compliant with the general principles of how IMI run their projects is coming up with a common data management strategy. So what is the tool chain that allows us to take data from the devices that we're equipping patients with, to record that data and to bring it into a central information repository? How do we capture that data? How do we allow the consortium as a whole to use that data as a foundation for modeling it? Some FPIR partners will be bringing historical data from internal trials to use as part of their contributions to this study, and so consequently data can be made available from previous studies in the same common information repository, and this allows us to provide a test bed to build to enable modeling, biostatistics, systems biologists and systems modelers the data they need to be able to model a trajectory and build these predictive models of relapse or exacerbation for each individual patient. So the tool chain really needs to flow from patients in the cohorts through the measuring devices and into a common information repository that allows us to both organize our data management and provide a platform for data modelers to be able to build predictive models and assess different ways of characterizing disease and predicting relapse. So that tool chain overall, split largely into the clinical, the devices and the data flow, are three essential layers of this project. An area that is mentioned in the call that we're very keen to make sure is not overlooked by participants is this, behind the scenes of this is as from Vipath's slides, the moving away from traditional models of care to a predict and preempt basis of treatment. And so it's very clear that we need to have, in parallel with this technical assessments, a conversation about the regulatory and policy landscape, about how this use of biosignatures that we may develop impact the patients and how it'll impact the care pathways. What does care look like if we're able to come up with a robust biosignature that will predict someone is about to have a depressive relapse? And so we need to be able to frame all of this work in parallel with a discussion with the regulatory agencies to understand what this would mean if we're successful in developing robust biosignatures. Overall, the project management capability has to bring all of these areas together and make sure they're all working to common trajectories. So that sort of encompasses everything. And as we have alluded to, we see the RADAR CNS topic as one topic in an overall RADAR program. And so it is worth imagining how the policy conversations, the data management conversations, and the tool conversations could potentially be redeployed or used or partnered with other investigators in further downstream studies. That's just something to be thinking about in terms of how we expand this project. These are what we think are the core components, and really as we have written the call, all of these things need to be considered by the applicants, from patients, the entire tool chain, and the regulatory element. Thank you very much.
Anthony, appreciate that. Next slide, please. So this slide, we are speaking a little bit about the expected contributions from the applicants. And we've just broken it down into the various types of expertise that we think will be required to successfully prosecute, the RADAR CNS topic in particular and the RADAR program in general as well. From the academic, clinical, and disease area experts, I think the first and foremost thing that would need to be on the table is actually access to patient cohorts that you think could be recruited into these observational studies. Then, of course, expertise in being able to design and conduct these clinical studies. What would be the endpoints? What would be the inclusion criteria? How will these data be collected? How will we, correlate these data to diagnostic changes, etc. And of course, interpretation of results, not just from an analytical perspective, but from the perspective of clinical significance. So, we have we would like to see strong capabilities in these areas. Like I said, these are observational studies. We are looking to track changes in disease state, predict relapse. But of course, the key thing here is sort of the new types of data that we collect from biosensors. And so there will have to be a multidisciplinary sort of consortium, and a component of it would be what are really the latest remote assessment technologies that could be developed further or modified to be used in these populations. And some thinking about of course, there's always a trade-off in collecting more and more detailed data using more and more advanced technologies and devices, and marrying that with sort of with sort of the usability and the feasibility of adherence of these devices in real world patient populations. And I think that this was something that we expect the members to bring some insight to the table. We, we in the industry, have sort of thought about it somewhat, and we'd be happy to, of course, also share our experiences. As Anthony mentioned, that if really, I mean, the goal here is not just to do an observational study and collect some data and analyze it. The goal here is to really develop a solution, and the solution does not get developed if we don't have all aspects of this taken care of, including how will data flow, how will data be managed, how will it be reduced, how will it be processed to really find the biosignatures. And again, in sort of keeping with this notion of developing it more as a solution that's going to impact patients rather than just sort of optimizing every component of it, a key element is that how will we translate any of the findings that we get, that okay, these data from such devices are predictive of relapse when analyzed in the following population. How will any of these insights actually be translated into the the healthcare system? So who will regulate it? If so, at what levels? How will the healthcare system interact with it? Who are the stakeholders involved? Is it the patient, the caregivers, the case managers, the physician themselves? How will these alerts go out? I think really understanding the regulatory landscape and the clinical care pathways and the patient advocacy groups, I think those elements are also going to be key if we are to translate this into the real world. And finally, I should add that I think I mentioned this earlier as well, that the only way these technologies are going to be adopted and become sort of pervasive is if there is a general rise in the tide of understanding the credibility of these technologies, the acceptability of these technologies. So we do expect that raising awareness and publishing a peer-reviewed, credible articles and in this space is going to help with the overall sort of field here. And we, at least in Janssen and the rest of the FPM members, feel strongly about it. And let me actually just say a few words here. So we not a day passes when we don't see somebody publishing an app or some sort of fancy little sort of tool on your smartphone which can do this and do that, and we, at least as a serious science-based company, will not sort of put our name behind the various claims that go around unless there is good evidence to show that yes, data from these devices, these apps, etc., are really predictive of any significant clinical sort of parameters. And so part of the goal of this sort of is to generate that evidence base, to create the sort of the body of knowledge that will really put these technologies in a sort of in a different sort of setting where they are more clinically validated, there are more publications, and then we can actually have a meaningful dialogue with physicians and patient groups and regulators about the proper use of these technologies. So hopefully that angle is coming through here as well. Next slide, please. And like I said, over the last few months, in fact over a year, we in multiple companies have been coming together to really see what could we bring to the table when enabling such a consortia, and the companies that have had these conversations include, of course, Janssen, Lundbeck, Biogen, IDEC, Merck, and UCB, and one of the things that we will bring to the table, of course, is the fact that we have, all of us collectively have many, many years of clinical expertise in developing therapeutics, in understanding these patient populations, these disease areas, designing studies, understanding regulatory pathways, at least as they pertain just to sort of, drugs and sometimes devices as well. So we do intend to bring this expertise to the table and provide as much input as required. In addition to just the clinical and regulatory expertise, we, some of the FPR partners have also agreed to bring in data that we are in the process of collecting in studies that are very similar to the ones we are proposing be done in the consortiums. So just as an example, we in Janssen are doing a study right now to understand changes in disease state in depression, relapse in depression, using various remote sensing and self-report sort of technologies. And we have committed that as data from this study becomes available, we will bring the data to this particular consortium so that the consortium can learn from it and sort of take the necessary, use it in a way that furthers the goals of the consortia. Anthony was just on the line. Like I said, that we have internally in various FPR companies also developed specialized groups around the informatics and the analytics of streaming data, and certainly that's an expertise we'll be bringing to the table as well, and this hopefully will help design the overall architecture of RADAR. And finally, we will also be in a position to make some in-kind contributions as far as devices themselves are concerned. I think I alluded to it earlier that as we have initiated some of these studies internally within our companies, we have done our own evaluation of the various devices and technologies. In some cases, have procured these devices, and we'd be happy to be able to share some of those devices with the consortia. And if the consortia so decides that those devices are suitable for use in the observational studies they propose, then that's a possibility. Next slide, please. So, this slide again, sort of wants to highlight some of the key points that you should consider as applicants. I think the first point is really around the patient cohorts, right? I think that our goal in this is to really generate new evidence about the clinical significance of remotely assessed parameters. And we cannot do it unless we collect more data in real patients and observational studies. So I think the sort of the crux of this particular proposal for applicants is the ability to access such patients, is the ability to sort of collect data and design these studies, recruit these studies, and prosecute these studies. And this, I think, is going to be a key. And like I said, that one of the goals is for multiple entities to come together. And so the challenge to the applicants is that how do you sort of marry this expertise in the clinical cohorts and recruitment and the clinical sort of insights with the necessary technological sort of savvy of the devices and the measures and collecting those data, and then the translational aspects of it, which is, how will this then be translated into the real world? What are the regulatory challenges? What are the healthcare challenges? So we really see it as sort of a multidisciplinary pie, and as applicants, one of the things we will look at is that who is able to, not because they have everything that they need as individual applicants, but as a consortia, who is able to address all these issues in a comprehensive manner. But like I said, there is no issue around regulatory pathways, and there is nobody to put a device onto if we don't have the right patient cohort. So, hopefully you will keep that front and center in your mind. Next slide, please. So this This slide again, I think we have spoken to right through the presentation, but just formally lists out what are sort of some of the deliverables that we expect. So, like I said, through the sort of conduct of these observational studies, collecting the data, analyzing those, we want to be able to develop candidate biosignatures that predict relapse and track disease state changes using the parameters that I mentioned: sleep, physical activity, speech, cognition, social connectivity, and memory. Now, listen, our goal at the end is to come up with the minimalist biosignature that has the most predictive power. Remember, always keep the translational issue in mind. So we do not want to have a biosignature that requires 5 different devices to measure, because then if you take a patient-centric view, we are expecting people in the real world to walk around with 5 devices. No, we may do the study to collect as much data from different devices just for discovery purposes and for because we don't know which of those data types might be most predictive. But our goal is to finally find the most parsimonious biosignature that can hopefully be measured by a set of devices that are easily worn by a real world patient, and data reuse. Maybe if something that people are already sort of technology that people are already adopting, and we can reuse those data to now make clinical sort of judgments. I think that would be sort of the kind of mindset we need to have. So related to that, of course, we want to develop the algorithms and the analytical infrastructure to come up with this sort of minimalist biosignature that I just talked about. I think a key thing, if you really want to develop this as a solution that will be adopted by large patient populations, has to be privacy and usability, and this is something that also needs to be addressed as an issue, and any solution that we derive has to address these parameters. So, for example, if you're talking about passive sort of sensing of social sort of activity, well, clearly we don't expect a solution to go out where you will be explicitly measuring social activity in a way that does not address privacy concerns. I've already talked quite a bit about delineation of regulatory pathways and the clinical care pathways and how this solution will interface with various stakeholders. So these are all the deliverables. As you can see, it's a multidimensional sort of approach, and this is the reason why we think that multiple partners have to come together in a consortium setting to really fully deliver on this set of deliverables. Next slide, please. And hopefully this is something that is obvious to people who are applying to the consortia, but there are I think multiple benefits to different stakeholders. Academic researchers will come up with novel ways to characterize diseases and patients. This notion of digital biomarkers, access to new types of technologies, correlating it with more traditional biomarkers, etc. The more technology, subject matter experts will see their sort of biosensor technologies and IT solutions being used to fulfill unmet clinical needs, and this will create more avenues and unlock more value to the devices that they are developing otherwise, and they will also get access to patients, which typically is not something that they are more easily able to do. I think the patient organizations, I think they're an important stakeholder here, right? Patients are quite well aware that they are increasingly generating more and more amounts of data, and more amounts of these data are getting out there in the ecosystem, and I think it will be an opportunity for patients to control the use of this data and derive clinical value from these data, and really start sort of moving to this paradigm of patient centricity that we in pharma think is the way things are going to go. And so really I think that there is plenty of benefit that we can communicate to patient organizations as well. And from pharma and tech companies' perspective, I think it's fair to say that we in pharma really have to start thinking of more patient-centric approaches, we have to not just show up with the, the pill or the drug, at acute, just after acute episodes and expect to get reimbursed for the drug. We have to understand changes in disease state more holistically. Where possible, we need to be able to predict and preempt issues, and we need to engage and take part in the ecosystem of data that is being generated around the patients in a way that improves overall patient outcomes. And so these are some of the sort of high-level motivations that we in pharma have as well. And like I said, for tech companies, really it is a great reuse of their technologies in a clinical setting. Next slide. All right, so that was actually the last slide. And, I think that, my goal here was to just, speak to some of the motivations behind RADAR, our expectations from this RADAR consortium. And at this point of time, we'll be happy to take any questions that you have.